This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the VP of Marketing and Corporate Development for Energy Fuels, Mr. Curtis Moore. Curtis, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Gerardo. Nice to join you again.
It's been a few weeks, a lot of news in the uranium space. You had some news today that I got some questions about, and I wanted to pass those along. But let's get right into the headline. Energy Fuels enters into agreement to acquire prompt fission neutron borehole logging technology and equipment, securing control over this critical technology for U.S. ISR uranium production. I'm impressed you managed to fit that all in one news release headline. Let's get right into the details. Give me the premise for this acquisition. Then let's get into the labeling of the technology as critical, because I definitely got some questions about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was quite a headline. So about as long as you want to go. But yeah, this is something we're really excited about. Simply because this is a technology that is really needed in order to properly develop and produce from ISR projects, particularly in the United States. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a geologist or a technical guy, so I'm going to be giving you kind of the high level view of what this means from my standpoint. But as I understand it, what PFN technology does is that it gives you better data on the ore that you're running into in your drill holes, and they can be used for exploration. In fact, this technology was used to discover the Beverly mine down in South Australia, which is even producing today. It's a wonderful ISR mine, but it's also used quite a bit. In fact, in pretty much all the ISR projects in the United States. Simply because it just gives you that better data on ore grade for all your drill holes. There's a significant amount of disequilibrium that you run into, particularly in the United States, and as I understand, with younger uranium deposits, geologically speaking. And so this just gives you real-time data as you're doing your drill holes, rather than having to go back and take samples back to the lab and do detailed analysis of that. So we now have the technology. We have some PFN equipment even before this. And I think most of the U.S. Producers probably have some as well. But now we have all the intellectual property. We have all the plans, all the specifications. We're now the ones that are able to service and maintain other people's PFN equipment and license future equipment. So it's something that we certainly needed for our own operations, but I think it's also going to be something that we can monetize and license out to other U.S. producers in particular.
That's a great overview, Curtis. And that was one of the questions that I received, actually, was whether or not you would be monetizing the patent, the licenses, the royalties, and whether or not, this was technology that you could generate revenue from. Did you want to speak to that in detail a bit more?
Yeah, we believe it is. Before we acquired this, we were likely to have to go to the previous owner and pay them to maintain and upgrade and help us operate our PFN tools. Now we have that ability to, of course, handle it internally, and then anybody else who has this, that uses the same technology. And I think that it's most of the folks here, certainly in the United States and honestly elsewhere around the world, they're now going to have to come to us. And we do intend to monetize this. And if things come back in the United States, like we think that they will, especially with the recommendations in the Nuclear Fuel Working Group, I think that we're going to have a fairly quick payback on this acquisition.
Let's talk about that. The price, it was relatively cheap, $500,000. Why the impetus now? Was there an urgency because of the quality of the deal, or is it something that you plan on putting to use imminently?
Yeah, so it basically came up for sale recently. The previous owners of it have been looking to sell it and sell the equipment and the technology. And so we just saw an opportunity and decided to jump on it. So, I think $500,000 is a pretty inexpensive number. I mean, as I understand this, the same package was going for a few $1 million just a few years ago. But yeah, we got it for $500,000 US, and again, I think it's going to more than pay for itself very, very quickly.
Oh, that was my next question is, if you had to replace it and buy the equipment brand new, what that looked like. And obviously you're saying in the order of a couple of $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the equipment plus the technology I think went for a few years ago. It did come with quite a bit of just equipment. Including a couple of logging trucks and computers and and PFN tools and generators and other technology. I think just the equipment alone probably is worth $500,000. And then on top of that, we have the rights to the technology. And again, I think we're going to be able to monetize that in the future as we help other people with their projects.
Excellent. How are the lines of communication with the U.S. government now that we have the Nuclear Fuel Working Group recommendations laid on the table and, both sides of the aisle obviously looking to see what opportunities there may be there? Has the communication increased? Is it steady? Are you seeing interest out there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into too many details, but there's definitely a lot of interest in examining multiple ways to help the U.S. uranium industry. And I think that Nuclear Fuel Working Group report, I have a feeling that a lot of people kind of misunderstood what that really represented. And, in our view, this is extraordinarily positive because what it did, it just laid out this nearly irrefutable case as to why the United States needs to have a healthy uranium and nuclear fuel industry. Because if we don't do this, we're going to basically be ceding control of the global nuclear industry and even the U.S. nuclear industry to some of our geopolitical foes like Russia. And so, it laid out a menu of items that politicians and policymakers can choose from. We've already seen that President Trump has requested money for this U.S. uranium reserve. On top of that, they've said that they recommended increasing the size of the American Assured Fuel Supply, which is basically backup fuel for U.S. Nuclear power plants, and a whole host of other things that they can do to support this industry. And so, I think it's the strongest support and commitment from the U.S. government in many, many decades. And again, from our perspective, and from what we're seeing right now, it's almost like they're just willing to do what it takes to make sure that the U.S. industry comes back. So we're excited to see what comes up here the coming weeks and months.
We chatted recently. Energy Fuels announced that it was making an entry into the rare earth space. Anything to report there?
Not right now. We are making a lot of headway, but nothing that is ready to announce yet. So stay tuned. I'll just say that.
Fair. You also announced Q1 financials on May the 1st, 2020. What does the Treasury look like? I believe it was something along the lines of 48 million, and I'm working off of memory here, so excuse me if my memory is incorrect.
It was in that range. I'd have to go look to see exactly what the numbers were, but we do have a robust balance sheet. It was $48 million, I believe, of cash, marketable securities, and inventory. I think the interesting thing for your listeners to note is our inventory, the value. So it's carried on our balance sheet, basically at the lower of then prevailing market prices or cost.
Right.
And so our uranium inventory is actually being carried at like $23 per pound, which we have. I think we had 520,000 pounds at March 31st. As I'm sure the current spot price is $34 per pound. And I believe the vanadium is being carried at, if I'm not mistaken, around $6 per pound. And the current spot price of vanadium is higher than that. So I think, that if you apply today's commodity values, the value of our inventory is probably worth another, $5 to $7 million. So I think we've got by far the healthiest balance sheet of certainly anybody in the United States. I think that will certainly help us going forward.
Any immediate plans to put some of that cash to work in the field at any of the significant projects that you have, or are you waiting to get more clarity on which direction the DOE and the U.S. government takes?
Yeah, we're waiting to get more clarity. We haven't signed any contracts yet. There hasn't been any announcements of any sort of purchasing, by the government or anything like that. We're not going to run out and just based on the Nuclear Fuel Working Group report, for instance, run out and start ramping up production. Yeah, we're waiting for real firm commitments before we do that. But honestly, we are far more ready than basically anybody else in the U.S. uranium space. We did spend the last couple of years we called it our uranium readiness program,
Yep.
where we were investing some capital in our projects just to make sure that when the gun goes off, we will be ready to go out and start increasing production very, very quickly, quicker than anybody else in the United States.
I giggle because I sense a real uranium bull market. And the reason I sense that is you're the second person to tell me that this week, Curtis.
Very good. Yep. I have a feeling it's turning.
I love it. Listen, thank you so much for the thorough update. I'm looking forward to having you back on. I think the news flow and the news cycle obviously is going to continue to advance robustly. So thanks for the time today. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Look forward to chatting with you soon.
All right. Take care, Curtis.